And we are now recording. So this is section 12 of chapter 6 of the Bhava Prakash, covering Kritana Varga. This is the processing and cooking of food mentioned in Ayurvedic texts for therapeutic and healing purposes. Now, Bhava Prakash is a text that's considered to be written around 500 years ago. It is compiled from ancient texts, so these are very ancient recipes. And this is a very important chapter, and it covers the preparation of many different types of food grains. So the word used, Kritana Varga, means preparation of food, specifically food grains. Grains are considered very important. If you can hear me, just please give some indication on the chat. There you go. Okay, great. I haven't done this for a little while, so and we've all just been a little sick, so I'm a little out of sorts. Anyway, food grains are very important. They are important to sustenance. You need a lot of different things. You know, your body needs a lot of different things, but the food grains that we have give us strength. They give us nourishment. They give us the ability to, to form tissues. Really, we get all of the proteins that we need from various food grains. Now, there are also different properties of these different grains. In the West, we tend to think of these in terms of taste. Oh, I like the taste of something with corn, or I like the taste of something with wheat, or with rice, or with barley. But really, although taste is an important component, the properties are different. So, for example, most dals have a component of vata in them. The vata and the space component is significant. Wheat will tend to be kapha increasing. Rice will tend to be more cooling. So, for example, a person who has kapha prakriti may lean more toward having some rice and even some other grains like rye, and may reduce wheat somewhat, and may also lean somewhat more toward having dals and other legumes. Whereas vata person may have more wheat. Pitta persons will like to have rice. Rice will have naturally a cooling effect. Rice in many parts of India is very much a staple part of the diet. So for example, in a hot area like West Bengal, rice is it's a very significant part of the diet. There's not nearly as much wheat as there is rice. Part of this has to do with the climate. West Bengal is very hot and steamy and tropical. Wheat does not do well there. Wheat does well in North India. The main wheat growing area in India is in Punjab. Punjab is more northern. It tends to get cold in the winter, and people grow a lot of wheat. People use a lot of wheat. And roti or flatbread is very much a staple of the Punjabi diet. Anyway, so let's go on and let's see about what kind of things that we have here. So bhakta, a boiled rice porridge. Now, this is your basic rice recipe, but it's cooked in a way that it becomes a little mushy. So basically, rice is washed and soaked for 10 to 30 minutes, and it's boiled in 5 times the volume of water. So 5 times, that's considerably more. Now, when I first learned to make rice, and I was, trying to make rice that wasn't mushy, the general proportion was a maximum of 2 cups of water for 1 cup of rice for white basmati rice. Of course, it's much different for brown rice. Brown rice requires a significantly higher proportion because it takes much longer to cook. Um, so anyway, 5 times the volume of water, it is going to, you're going to cook this, and we have a little recipe here. And the frothy portion is drained out. This is probably the common way that rice is still prepared in places where people eat a lot of rice. It's eaten warm. This frothy portion is drained out. Now, of course, anyone who's familiar with Mexican culture will know that the water from rice is what people use to make the drink. The horchata is basically rice water. They sweeten it because it has a lot of starch in it, and it makes a very nice drink, except that people usually have it cold. So the rice is consumed warm, and options are to add ghee, cumin, and turmeric. The cumin will aid in digestion. This will increase the digestive fire. It will help taste. So in tastes of aruchi and ajirna. So if digestion is poor, if ajirna means that I'm having trouble digesting, things are not getting digested or they're not getting absorbed, or aruchi, I don't have any taste. Having this, you have this with a little bit of ghee and salt. And even a person who is weak and sick, if you've had an extended illness, you do not feel like eating, you just don't have any taste, and if you put some of this in front of someone, some taste will come. It will be very, very easy to eat, easy to digest. If you consume this cold, it's going to be hard to digest. It will cause loss of taste, and it will increase kapha. So there's something that should be prepared warm. It should be prepared and eaten warm. So the basic recipe for doing this: wash 1 cup of white rice. So this will not work with brown rice. Brown rice is really quite different in terms of how you prepare it. So this recipe specifically applies to white rice or white basmati rice. So wash 1 cup of white rice, soak it in cold or room temperature water for 30 minutes. You probably also want to use your filtered water. If you don't have a reverse osmosis water filter, it is a recommended thing. They waste a little bit of water. They waste about, for every gallon of water you produce, you waste a gallon of water, but it gives you a much better quality of removing all the excessive minerals and other chemicals. Most of the undesirable things will get removed. So soak it, because that water is going to get absorbed. A lot of water will get absorbed in the rice. So you want to use your clean water for that. Soak it in cold water or room temperature water. Then you want to bring 5 cups of water to a boil. You drain the soaked rice, just discard that soaked water. That doesn't do you anything. And then immediately add it to the boiling water and stir it until it comes back to a boil. Once it's boiling, it's not going to stick. You want to cook it for at least 15 minutes, and the rice should be fully expanded and soft. If you see the grains of rice, they should look like they're split open. They should look split. That's fully expanded. Then you can drain and you can keep the rice water. Add 1 tablespoon of ghee and ½ a teaspoon of turmeric powder. You could also heat that tablespoon of ghee. Adding that tablespoon of ghee to the rice that's cooked, this is already, it's going to immediately melt. Even if the ghee is a little cold, it's going to melt and it's going to mix in with that rice. You could alternatively heat 1 tablespoon of ghee, and you could brown ½ a teaspoon of whole cumin seeds and then add it to the cooked rice and mix in. You don't want to mix it excessively, otherwise it's already going to be very, very soft, and if you mix it too much, it's going to get mushy. You want to serve it warm or hot, and serve it with some salt or some salty preparations on the side. And this is the traditional way that it's done. If you go to a, meals will be served, and I've been to many places on pilgrimage in India, and you'll go and sit down with a few hundred other people, and they'll use banana leaf or other tree leaf plates, naturally biodegradable. And the first thing that comes around is the rice, and someone will come around with giving everyone a little bit of salt and a piece of lemon and maybe some fresh chilies. So that way everyone can balance according to their prakriti, according to their taste. They can add just a little bit of salt. The rice itself is cooked without salt because one size does not fit all. So everyone can mix the salt to their taste. But you do want to serve it with something. You don't want to just serve unsalted. Other types of salty preparations that can easily be made. You can make some vegetables with salt. You know, so for example, you could take an eggplant and shred it using a shredder, you know, like a cheese grater, and add that to some oil, let's say olive oil, a good amount of olive oil, and add, before adding the shredded eggplant, add some cumin, and then add a little bit of chopped green chili, and add the shredded eggplant. And quantity doesn't have to be really big, maybe half an eggplant. Cook it for a good 5 or 10 minutes because eggplant's tough, but when it's shredded like this, it cooks quickly. And then add salt and make it a little salty. And then you also add a little tiny bit of sugar. So I'll just type the ingredients in here. So let's say that's about 1/2 of an eggplant, shredded. So let's say it's about, you know, a good generous amount. I would say maybe 1/8 of a cup of olive oil or canola oil. You know, maybe 1/2 teaspoon of cumin seeds. They should crackle. Chopped green chili to taste. Could be just a tiny amount, or you can add some black pepper. And then you add the shredded eggplant. Let's say cook it about 10 minutes in a, if it's in a flat pan, it should be covered. If it's not such a flat pan, if it's a little, you know, more narrow, it might not need to be covered. So you could add, let's say, add salt. I would say maybe 1 teaspoon. You want this to come out a little salty. This is something that you're going to have with rice. So this is just a salty preparation that you can have with rice. It's got a lot of oil in it, and this cumin is going to give you some digestion, help with your digestion a little bit. And you can add just maybe 1 teaspoon of raw sugar to this. That's it. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. It's actually a type of achar. So that's just an example of one type of salty preparation that you could serve with this unsalted rice so that, you know, everyone can have a little something. And obviously, it's fairly easy to scale this up. So this is very quick. All right, so let's move on. So lentil soups, which can be done with all types of lentils or dals. So some types of dal, you know, the easiest one is yellow split mung, green split mung. And go. Green split mung, tur dal. That's also pigeon peas. Dried. Chana dal. Chana dal are actually a variant of garbanzos. And there are several others as well. Urad dal, masoor dal. There's also whole green mung. Whole green mung takes longer. Takes much longer to cook. So this is called in Sanskrit dali. So dali is prepared by soaking the dal beans overnight. This is the recommended way to do it. I know I'm guilty of sometimes not doing it because I'm almost always in a hurry and don't do it. But it's better to soak it overnight first. Then you boil it in water with salt, fresh ginger, and asafoetida, which helps to reduce the vayu. Because remember, dals are naturally high in air and space. So this is called soup. That is the Sanskrit name for soup. It's soup. It will cause flatulence and constipation if taken cold. You must have it warm. And this should be done with a dehusked dal. So yellow split mung is the best. So this is one type of preparation. This is a soup. Okay, many different ways that you can make dal. So this would be best with chana dal, tur dal, or yellow split mung. Yellow split mung is going to be the best one for this. Yellow split mung is the easiest to digest. Let's say you are making a soup for someone who's been sick and you want something that's very easy to digest. You want to make a brothy soup with yellow split mung, and it's going to be very quick. It does not take a long time to cook. You can have this done in half an hour. So basic recipe, take half a cup of yellow split mung, wash it, soak it overnight. Do not discard the water. Just bring the whole thing to a boil and then discard the foam. Some foam comes on the top and you can just discard that. If there are impurities, if there were, various pesticides and other things that may have been used in growing, this is going to come out in the foam. You can just discard that. You want to cook 20 minutes in an open pot or 10 minutes in a pressure cooker. Pressure cookers are great for cooking dal, especially if you're cooking dal in a hurry. Some of these dals, if you don't use a pressure cooker, can easily take 40 minutes or an hour to cook thoroughly. So pressure cooker can really speed that time up. In the case of yellow split mung, really 20 minutes pretty much. That's it. It's going to start breaking up. You want to heat your oil or ghee separately and add approximately 1 tablespoon of minced fresh ginger. Now, I don't always give quantities for the oil or ghee because it's common sense. If you want to have a small pot, you want to have enough oil or ghee to cover the bottom of the small pot, and you want it to be able to immerse the things that you're going to put in it, right? So you're going to add about 1 tablespoon of minced fresh ginger and about 1/8 of a teaspoon of asafoetida or hing. And immediately you're going to add it to the soup because that hing, even though you're adding it after the fresh ginger, it will start to burn very quickly. So it's just going to be, kind of get that dash of hing in there after adding the fresh ginger and then toss it in. It's going to make a sound when you add it. You want to have a final volume of about 3 cups, so add 1 teaspoon of salt, which is going to come out to be about the right amount of salt for that volume. If you end up with less volume, it's not going to be right. It'll end up being too salty. So 1 teaspoon of salt will be about right for a 3-cup final volume. And you can add water if necessary to adjust. You want to cook it another 5 minutes or so with the chunk in there until the beans are soft and breaking up, but there's still some separation of the broth. Because if you are sick and you have trouble digesting, you can drink the broth of this soup, and you are going to get nutrition from it. It's really a very good recipe to make for the person who is recovering from illness, who doesn't have a lot of ability to digest. You know, you can give them this soup, and they can just drink the broth and make it with ghee, and this is going to be very nourishing. Even someone who has severe vomiting, you know, making something with ghee, something will stick. There was a story about my Guruji's Gurudev, who was very, very sick at one point, you know, and he had the type of sickness that could not keep anything down, could not even really keep down water. He'd drink water and he would vomit it. So it was a very severe illness, the type of thing that can, you know, that can kill you. And the Vaidya came and said, well, okay, give him a teaspoon of ghee every day. And they said, but if we give him a teaspoon of ghee, he's just going to vomit that up. I said, yeah, but something's going to stick, and then he'll be able to regain strength. And sure enough, that worked. He was able to regain enough strength to be able to overcome the sickness and then regain some digestion. So, you know, ghee can sometimes be given in a somewhat counterintuitive way when you can't even hold anything down. And that person who is sick can be able to get something from it, even if they may be vomiting. Then it's recommended to stick to kind of the clear liquids. So there you go, basic soup recipe. Now krishara. Krishara is rice and lentils boiled together as a porridge. So take some non-husked rice and non-husked different lentils. So this is all fibrous stuff. You're going to add them together and boil after washing and soaking separately. We'll talk about the details in the recipe part. It's boiled with salt, fresh ginger, and hingu. It increases shukra, or it increases shukra dhatu. It increases strength. It's a little hard to digest. It will increase pitta and kapha. Not that easy to digest. It can somewhat dull the intellect in excess, and it helps eliminate feces, so it's better for vata. Common sense, things with fiber will help to move the bowels. Sometimes getting the bowels moving along is very important because, as we know, one of the symptoms of health in Ayurveda is that we have regular elimination going on. We want to have balanced Agni, balanced doshas, regular elimination of the malakriya should be regular, very important. So basic recipe, wash 1 cup of brown rice and soak it for 30 minutes. You want to separately wash 1 cup of whole green mung and soak for at least 30 minutes. Then bring 6 cups of water to a boil. Drain the soaked rice and soaked dal and add it to the boiling water and then bring it to a boil. You can do this in a pressure cooker. This is one thing where if you have a pressure cooker, it is going to go better. You want to heat up 2 tablespoons of ghee and add 1 tablespoon of minced fresh ginger, followed by 1/8 teaspoon of hing. Pretty much the same as the previous one, and you're immediately adding that. And then you're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. We're ending up with twice the final volume, so we're using twice the amount of salt. Salt is used proportionally. You cook this in the pressure cooker for 20 minutes, or if you're in a covered pot, for 45 minutes. If you're going to put it in the covered pot, be aware this will tend to boil over, not necessarily at first, but as some of the protein starts to come out of the dal and some of the starches come out in the rice, they thicken that water, and that water will really tend to boil up. So cooking it in a pressure cooker saves you from that. If you use a lid, you're going to have to keep an eye and adjust the temperature to make sure it doesn't boil over. If the mixture becomes too dry, you may have to add water also if you're cooking it in the covered pot, because you do not want that to get too low. Having a kettle that can boil your water is a really handy thing, so then you can add hot water while something's cooking. Tapahari. Tapahari is another traditional preparation. You take black lentils or urd dal, and you do I have a recipe for tapahari? Yes, I do. Okay, so we'll talk about the details there. It's made into small balls with rice and fried with ghee and a little turmeric. Then water, salt, ginger, and hing. It has a lot of protein. It increases kapha and muscle mass. It decreases pitta and vata, somewhat aphrodisiac. It may cause some flatulence. It is somewhat stoutening. It helps with aruchi, and it's good for a lack of muscle mass. So this is not as easy to digest as the other things. So here's one basic recipe for tapahari. Take a half cup of urd flour. You can buy urd dal flour at the Indian store. Any Indian grocery will carry urd flour. And the same thing with rice flour, half a cup of rice flour. Rice flour you can usually find at pretty much any Asian grocery, because rice flour is used for many things. But of course it's easy to find it in an Indian grocery. Add half teaspoon of turmeric powder and half a teaspoon of salt. You're going to mix this in and you're going to make a paste. You're going to add cold water and you want to mix that thoroughly. It's going to be a thick and sticky paste. So to form this into these little marble-sized balls, you're going to have to wash your hands and keep your hands wet. That's going to help keep this paste dough from sticking. Otherwise, it's not like handling a dough made from wheat flour that has the gluten that holds it together. This is a sticky dough and it sticks to everything. So you want to, just keep your hands wet, and it just takes a little getting used to. And you can make little marble-sized balls. You can fry it in ghee on a medium heat for about 45 minutes. 4 to 5 minutes. You do not need a lot of ghee to fry this, but you do need enough for these balls to be immersed. So you could do it in a small pot that you can have about maybe an inch or so of ghee in the bottom. They'll turn reddish brown. That's a special property of urd dal, that when you fry it, it turns a reddish brown. And these are going to be very hard and tough when you're done frying them. So it's very high in protein. The protein in the urd dal and the starch in the rice are going to make these cooked all the way through, but they're going to be kind of like something that when you were a kid you might have put in a slingshot, and if you hit somebody with it, it would really hurt. Then you're going to bring 2 cups of water to a boil, and you're going to add about 1½ teaspoon of salt. That's going to be a salty water. 1/8 of a teaspoon of asafoetida and half a tablespoon of minced fresh ginger. Add these tough fried balls to the water and simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes on low heat, or until they have become tender. This is going to make the difference, simmering it for that 2 or 3 minutes, not too long. If you go too long, they're going to start to split and break up and kind of dissolve. But you want them to not be too tough. You want them to be tender. So that's tapahari. Khirika, or kheer. Now this is a very famous preparation. It has many names. It's also known as payasam or paramanna. You're basically going to take whole milk, ideally organic and non-homogenized. It's boiled and reduced to half with basmati or easily digested rice added, sugar and ghee added at the end. Details in the recipe on the next slide. Optionally, add cardamom and saffron. Raisins soaked in water may be added to increase ojas. So this is not so easy to digest, but it's very good for vata. It will decrease tikshnagni. So if someone is suffering from too much digestive fire, this will help to mitigate pitta. It will help to mitigate bleeding diseases. So, it's something that can be had sparingly. So the basic recipe, and I've suggested taking half a gallon of milk to start with because this is much easier to make in a larger quantity, and that's going to cook down quite a bit. This is something that takes a little bit of patience. Okay, let's see if I can reduce this a bit. Okay, all right. So take half a gallon of non-homogenized organic whole milk and bring it to a boil in a pot with at least a 1-gallon capacity. You want to use a pot with a thick bottom, you want to stir it frequently, and you want to cover it when you're not stirring. The milk will tend to boil over. So working with milk can be a bit challenging because it really likes to, it really wants to boil over. Milk is going to tend to do one of two things. It'll either stick to the bottom of the pot, which is going to produce a very unpleasant taste and really render it unusable, or it is going to or it will tend to boil over. So the milk comes to a boil, and it just, the way that milk is, when milk comes to a boil, it's sort of 1 minute, you're waiting for it to boil, and you're stirring it frequently, and you are hoping the milk's going to start boiling, and then suddenly it sort of starts rising up, and it rises up, and it rises up. The only way to stop that is you have to stir it or ladle it. I used to make a type of, a variant of Kidika in a very large 40-gallon steam kettle. And the steam kettle was this huge thing that would heat milk very evenly. And we used it for cooking other things as well. This was in a big industrial kitchen. But when it reached its temperature, there was no way to suddenly take it off the flame. It had a jacket with steam, coils around it, and you couldn't just turn the heat off. So what you'd have to do is stir it with this huge paddle until it got ready to boil, and then you had to wait there with a big pot to use as a ladle, and you ladle it like crazy to keep it from boiling over. And that was the only way that you could do it, but that actually worked pretty well. So once you have your milk boiling, you need very little stirring until the end. Then you're going to wash about 6 tablespoons or 3/8 of a cup of white basmati rice and immediately add it to the boiling milk. You don't want that washed rice to sit and dry out. If you do that, it's going to get all crumbly and break up. You want to wash it when you're ready to add to the boiling milk, and then you add it after draining the rinse water. You want to stir that to make sure the grains do not clump together or stick to the bottom. When you add the rice, the milk will tend to stop boiling. So just stir it again, and you have to again bring it to a boil. It will not take so long. And then adjust the heat so that the mixture remains at a good rolling boil. All that trouble to get the milk boiling, and now that it's boiling, it's pretty much, it's not exactly fire and forget because you need to pay attention to it, but it does not need constant attention. Then you can wash, this has gotten chopped off a little bit, half a cup of raisins and soak separately. So the milk and rice must boil for at least 1 hour. Rice in water cooks much faster than rice in milk. That's just how it works. But this is something that's going to end up being very thick, like a very thick pudding. It's not going to be like a rice pudding because that Western idea of rice pudding is, it's fairly different from Chidika. It's really not the same. You want to stir it occasionally to make sure there is no sticking on the bottom. As it boils, the rice is going to thicken the milk. Some of the starch in the rice is actually going to leach out into the milk, and it's going to thicken it. Actually condensing it to 1/2 the original amount, as suggested in Bhava Prakash, will take about an hour and a half. But as it begins to thicken, the tendency to stick will dramatically increase. So it's going to get thick, and then it's going to start to stick. As it thickens, you can add 2 tablespoons of ghee and continue cooking, and just keep going until it becomes too thick to manage, or you lose patience, whichever comes first. Then add about 1/2 cup of unrefined sugar. You can also use slightly less. This will loosen the mixture. Cook it another 2 to 3 minutes, and then remove it from the heat. You're pretty much done. You can add a large pinch of powdered cardamom, or you can use about 12 large green cardamom pods, shell them, and grind them up very thoroughly in a mortar and pestle or a little coffee grinder. Optionally, you can add some powdered saffron threads. Now you take your soaked raisins, drain them, and add it after the mixture has stopped boiling for 2 minutes. And this should be served warm. So it's a very it's a very heavenly preparation. It's often made sometimes for doing a puja, a ceremony to invoke blessings. There are many stories about sages who have made a preparation of kshirika and done a offering where they did some special invocation and asked for blessings, and that portion of this kshirika will sometimes be given, and sometimes in cases of infertility where someone is trying to conceive a child, a kshirika is made. It is offered to Bhagavan Vishnu, or blessings are invoked from Bhagavan Vishnu or Shankara, Shiva, and then this is given to the lady who is trying to conceive a child, and then this will. There have been many narrations of this type of special activity for blessings being done. It's a very rich preparation, and you don't need to have a lot of it to, feel that it has invested you with something. Now, there are other preparations that are described. There are a lot of different things. I'm going to give the names of these, and these are you can find these sometimes recipes for different preparations, but these are sort of the original Indian recipes. Indian food, as we popularly know it, tends to be a mix of things from places like Afghanistan and ancient Persia, where the invaders came from. But these are really the original Indian food preparations. So there's Narikela kshirika. There's a kshirika that's made with coconut. Sevika is a vermicelli kheer. So you can take these little wheat vermicelli and you can cook it in milk the same way. And it also thickens the milk, and the vermicelli is cooked and the milk is condensed. There's samita, or a wheat flour preparation, mandaka, or pot cake, polika, a cake fried in ghee, lapsika, rotika, of course, roti we're all familiar with. This is the Indian tortilla. Angara karkati. Angara karkati is a type of unleavened bread that's made by taking kind of a flat dough and it's being cooked in coals. So this is very much like a naan, like the tandoori naan. Basically, if you've ever seen people making the naan, it's pretty amazing. They make a kind of a loose, okay, so are we not seeing this slide? So all that I have here is I have the names of these things. And the Angarkarkati is like naan. They basically make a dough with flour. It's allowed to ferment a little bit, and they'll have the inside of a tandoor or a clay oven, and they'll mash it on the side, and it gets cooked very quickly with the coals in the bottom. Yava rotika is a roti that's made with barley. Balabhadrika chamasi, dhumasi jarchari, chanaka rotika. Chanaka rotika is a flatbread made with chana dal flour or besan. Pishtika, bidamika, parpat. So parpat is papadam. And this is a very popular thing. You can get these. There are many different types. There is a Kerala variety that's a little small. These are also called sometimes Guruvayur papadam. There's a North Indian variety that's flat. You can roast these. They cook very quickly. They get roasted and crispy. And it's actually an ancient recipe for making these. They're very tricky to make. It's much easier to prepare papadam that are ready-made, and they just have to be cooked. They can be fried or they can be roasted. Purika, which is puris. Vataka is vada. So a puri is basically a fried flat bread that puffs up. The vataka or vada is basically made from dal and fried, somewhat like the tapahari. Kanjika vataka, and that's kanjika vataka is a type of vada or a fried cake that is put in there's a black carrot that can be fermented somewhat so that it becomes a little sour, not fermented like wine, fermented like vinegar. Amla vataka, and that is another form. Mudga vataka, masha vataka is a vada made from urad dal. So many different types of these little cakes that are made from dal and fried. Kushmandaka vataka, that is a variety of vataka made with pumpkin. Kwatita is a boiled and spiced buttermilk. Besan, besan is the flour that is used, made from chana dal. So besan flour you can get at any Indian grocery. It's used in many recipes. There is a besan vataka that is made with that besan flour. So just, naming these, a lot of these are popular recipes in different parts of India. We do eventually want to have a cookbook that actually has these with pictures and recipes according to Bhava Prakash. So method for vegetables. So there's a general method that's given for preparing vegetables. Basically wash them and cut into small pieces, heat ghee and add jidaka, hing, and other powdered spices, then add the vegetables. Add water as needed and cook until done. So this is a very common method for preparing wet vegetables. It's something that we've covered in cooking workshops, but it's just given here in Bhava Prakash as this is the general way. You can take many different varieties of vegetables. You do not want to have rasa viruddha. You don't want to have conflicting varieties of vegetables. So for example, cruciferous vegetables will go well with potatoes, but cruciferous vegetables don't usually go well with eggplant. Pumpkin and potatoes and spinach. There are many things that spinach goes with. Spinach tends to be somewhat salty. Spinach tends to be high in vata, so spinach will go well with things that are somewhat kapha increasing. There's a very common way of making vegetable that's called lapra. Lapra means basically a mixed wet vegetable. You cook whatever's in the refrigerator, and you can, you can make a vegetable out of that. And looking at the vegetables that you're cooking, you can add spices to sort of balance the natural, the prakriti of the vegetables that you're cooking. So, that's the general method for the vegetables. There are more things also that are described in this chapter. Pakwana sadhana vidimantaka sampava karpura nalika Peni, Shashkuli, Sevika Modika, Mukta Modika, Vesana Modika, Dugda Kupika, and Kundalini. Kundalini is what's more popularly known as jalebi. It's a fried thing that's made with a spiral form, and then it is fried until it's crispy, and then it is put in a syrup. Now, things that can be had after a meal. This is called Pashtat Parivesya. So, Rasala, Amra Phalapanika is a mango syrup drink. And again, you can get a ready-made syrup in Indian groceries. It is sometimes called Ampanna. That is Amra Phalapanika. Amlaka Phalapanika, that is a yeah, I don't know what's happening, if WebEx is getting cranky with everyone or not. I hope you can see this slide. In any case, we do have the slide will be available as a PDF. Amlaka Phalapanika is a syrup that's made with amlaka, the amla fruit. So it has the syrupy, the sugar of the syrup is balancing the astringent and bitter taste of amla. Nimbuka Phalapanika. Nimbuka Phalapanika is nimbupani. Basically, it's not like lemonade. You basically take water and you add some of the nimbu, which are like the Mexican limes. They are not as sour as regular, the green limes or the yellow Meyer lemons that are popular. And then you add a little bit of salt and a little bit of raw sugar. It's not so sweet. I find lemonade very hard to handle. It's way too sweet. This comes out a little bit more like Gatorade, but without the funny green chemical properties. It has a little bit of a balance of electrolytes in it. So this is something that can be had after a meal. Dhanyaka Panika. Dhanyaka Panika is taking roasted barley and mixing it with water. Barley is naturally sweet. So you can, that roasted barley naturally has a good amount of barley sugar in it, malt sugar, maltose, and you can make a drink with that. Kanji. Kanji is made with the purple carrots and fermented. Jali, is another drink that can be had after a meal. Now, takra or buttermilk. Now, this can be made with the cultured buttermilk. It's traditionally, there's a way that butter is made. The milk is milk that sits in is churned. Naturally gets a little bit cultured as it's churned for butter. So what's left over has the butter removed. But there's a little bit of butter that's still left in that milk, and it has a little bit of sourness. You can also make this with yogurt. So you take 1 part of the yogurt and you mix it with 4 parts of clean water. You fry some hingu in oil, add roasted cumin and rock salt, and make it into a paste. And then you mix it in the yogurt and water and churn it, or use a blender. So that is takra. So this is another type of drink that one can have. Dugda, or milk. Milk is another thing that can be had after a meal. If there's a burning sensation, a small amount of warm milk may be taken. Now, Suckdo. Suckdo is a category for drinks that are made with roasted grains. Are we getting the slides? Are they coming across? I can try to reshare this and see if that helps. Are you able to see the slide with Suckdo on it? All right, let's try resharing that. Okay. Okay. So I don't think the problem is on my end. All right, well, we'll go on ahead, and then you can also go over this with the PDF. Let me share the PDF also. Okay. All right, can everyone see this slide? So Suckdo is basically grains that are dry roasted or fried on a pan and then made into a powder. And this is made into a warm drink after meals. Now notice this is a warm drink. There is not much mixing of any meal with any cold drink. Drinks are room temperature or they're warm, because cold, ice water is about the worst thing that you can do with digestion. If you eat out somewhere here, we get blue in the face saying, yes, I'll have water. No ice, please. I mean, ice water is about the worst thing to have with a meal. People even have a wacky idea about, okay, if I have ice water, I'll lose weight because it's going to interfere with my digestion. What is that going to do? Well, you're producing AMA. It's going to produce AMA because you are screwing up your digestion. And if your idea of health is to be more skinny, but to have imbalance and to have other potential problems, that's anyway a very imbalanced approach to things. But so Suckdo it can be made with barley. You can add ghee and just a little bit of sugar. It is cooling and it's good for hot summer. The Shali Suckdo is a rice drink, and this is something like horchata, except that it's had warm. It assists Agni and it's easy to digest. It has a cold potency. It's sweet. It can produce some constipation. It helps with taste. It's good for health, gives strength, and increases shukra. It increases shukra dhatu. So that's Suckdo. Now this Shali Suckdo is actually made. This is not just taking the rice water from boiling the rice. This is roasting the rice and then making it into a powder. Sharkarodaka. So sharkarodaka is had in small amounts. It's basically sugar water that has a little bit of sugar to sweeten it. It's not like a syrupy sweet. Like sodas are really, really super sweet, and they add a lot of, the carbonation between the carbonation and the acidity. They're a very, kind of imbalancing sort of thing. It's just water, a little bit of sugar added. Maybe you have a large glass of water and you add half a teaspoon of some raw sugar and a little bit of cardamom, cloves, and edible camphor, and pipali. Pipali is long pepper. So this is cold. It increases shukra. It's sweet. It mitigates vata and pitta. It's good for fainting, vomiting, burning sensation, thirst, and fever, and for dehydration. One can also add rock salt and roses. Very simple, but it's a very pleasant sort of thing that one can have a little bit of this in small quantities after a meal. Not cold, but room temperature. Now, dhana, or fried barley, can be had on its own, not as a drink. It is good for nausea and vomiting. It can increase kapha. It can be good for balancing kapha and for mandagni in small amounts. The husked fried barley is hard to digest, causes dryness and thirst, supports diabetes, kapha issues, and supports chardi, or vomiting. So this is the fried barley. It can be fried or it can be roasted. The fried barley is going to be more drying. Now, it's a little hard to get the type of barley that you can prepare this way. It's easy to get the pearled barley. That is barley that has been husked and also prepared a certain way. I do not have as much experience with barley, but this is more like, I believe in natural groceries now you can get the natural barley whole grains that can be prepared for this. But this is something we're going to work on and eventually come out with a cookbook that has recipes. Holika. So holika is dry roasted lentils, or they can be cooked on a direct fire, and it's recommended to use a fire from hay. It increases vata slightly. It reduces kapha, or medas. Basically, it's a slow-cooked dal. So you can have a dal, and you can add some spices and ghee, and you can basically cook it on coals. There's a restaurant in India that has a very famous dal dish, which is basically a variant of holika. They call it bukhara dal. Bukhara means fever. And basically, they cook it overnight. They make the dal and they put it in a pot, and they put the pot on some coals, and it stays hot enough that it keeps cooking. And the wood coals also give a certain kind of smoky property to the dal. But it's a lot of work to do that. Uchi. So uchi is taking unripe grains. They can be cooked or fried. You can take a fresh corn cob or pearl barley cooked directly on fire, which is half cooked. This will balance pitta and vata, increase kapha, and give strength. Now, this is roast corn, basically. So the simplest way to do this is to do roasted corn. So you can get a fresh corn on the cob, and you can roast it on coals, or you can even roast it over a flame. And the corn gets a little charred on the outside, or it should turn brown. It shouldn't get charred. And then you can have this with some powdered spices. It's a very common type of street food in India to get this roast corn, and it's fairly easy to make at home. Other preparations, there's the laja, which is rice which is not husk, which has been fried or puffed, puffed rice. Jipita, Prituka, Kulmasha, Palala, Pinyaka, which we're not going to get into now. Oops. And that is the end. So thank you very much for being patient with me, and I hope you found this interesting. Some of these things, I think, you can look into some of these things. You can find the you can find sometimes Indian recipe books that have recipes for some of these very old recipes. Sometimes the names will be a little different. For example, the vatakas are all called vada. You can also get ready mixes for some of these vadas in the Indian store. They are generally fairly, accurate in terms of sticking to the traditional mix, but these are all things that you can experiment with. So again, thank you very much for your patience, and if you have any questions, this will be a good time. Otherwise, please put them on the forums. I know that I do also have assignments that have been submitted, and I need to give feedback on those. So I will be doing that in the coming week. All right, well, we're going to stop recording and end there. And namaste, and thank you very much.